recording starting now. Okay, so tonight we are talking about the book of James. I would like to know, what do you know about the book of James already?
It's in the New Testament.
New Testament book.
There's wisdom in there.
James.
His name is James, yeah.
Someone once said that he was really angry the whole time.
Yes. He's sometimes an angry guy.
Martin Luther didn't want it in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Is it written?
Why?
Because he thought that it contradicted Paul's teachings about grace alone.
Mm-hmm.
Because it talks about like faith without works being dead.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Legalistic
Yeah.
is a word that's used of it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was James's relationship to Jesus? Anybody know?
Brother?
Brother.
Yeah.
Right.
Brother or someone?
Pretty close.
Remember which brother?
Yes. Good.
This brother.
Touch and go.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Yeah, so James, this is James, the brother of Jesus, not James, the disciple of Jesus. So when we're reading Acts, we see that James is beheaded pretty early on. Too early.
The
Which
brother
one?
or the...
The brother
James, the disciple,
is beheaded.
was beheaded too early to have written this book.
Oh.
Yeah. So that helps us contextualize it to kind of realize that it was more likely James, brother of Jesus.
Oh wow.
And that gives us some context of James was not a supporter of Jesus' ministry. We see many times in the Gospels the brothers are telling Jesus that he should not be doing what he's doing. But he must have become a Christian later in life. I think there's actually a place, maybe it's Galatians, where it says that he had a post-resurrection appearance even. So yeah, we're going to be looking at the book of James, and one thing that I was going to bring up is that the most famous verse in the book is faith without works is dead. Maybe I should say infamous, because a lot of people do not like how it seems like James is saying that here are all the laws you have to follow in order for your faith to actually be valid. But we're going to talk about James in a way that I hope reframes that opinion that either you might have or you've had in the past, anything like that, because we're going to be looking at James from the perspective of rich and poor, because he talks about those a lot, but we don't usually give them as much credence as we should. So we're going to be looking at that, and I want us to turn to James 5, 1 through 9. And if someone could read it, that'd be great, especially since my phone's recording. James 5, 1 through 9.
Do you have a preference for translation?
Yeah, the weirder the better.
I've got USB.
The weirder.
How about that?
Yeah, weird enough.
Okay, 1 through 9.
Yes.
Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire.
Okay.
You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth. Be patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's great.
I was like,
So, what stands out? What's surprising? What's interesting?
I think
It's very strong language. And it, like, at first glance can be like, oh, James just hates rich people.
Yeah.
But like as you read, you see like the way that they're using their wealth and hoarding it, rather than paying their workers fair wages and being generous. It seems like that's more what he's focusing on, that they're oppressing the poor,
Yeah.
rather than using and stewarding their wealth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna talk about this, but do you know if
he's talking to just the rich in general, or specifically like rich Christians, like the rich church.
We are going to talk about
Okay.
that. Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know, because he's like, if he's just talking about the rich in general, that's a lot less concerning. But if he's talking about the rich people in the church, then it's like, oh, that's like
Yeah.
a big deal. Like, it's
Yeah.
a lot scarier, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also have a big contrast with the rich people, whether they're Christians or not, getting a very harsh rebuke, and then it turns.
Yeah.
I think it's in verse 6, maybe.
7
Verse 7.
Patient.
to like,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
hold on, guys.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, part of the debate will be, is he turning from Christians to other Christians, or is he turning from non-Christians to
I think it's
Christians?
interesting that the opposite of like being rich and
Evil and those kind of things is like patience, you know.
Interesting.
It's like not what I would have expected.
Yeah.
The contrast to be between.
Right. Yeah, so I think that when you couple this passage with a lot of other passages in James, it becomes clear that the primary audience, at least the primary audience that James is writing to, are poor Christians. When we use that context, it can read to contextualize verses like persevering, count it all joy when you suffer persecutions of many kinds, and not taking each other to courts, possibly some legal fees involved in there. It's a longer conversation than I have time for, so we're just going to focus in on this one passage. But it does seem, and I'll make a little bit of an argument, that there are some rich Christians in the audience who are showing that their faith is not real faith because they don't have good works of treating people well. Recontextualizing the idea of faith without good works is dead, with kind of the opposite. Faith with bad works is dead. Faith with bad works. So a big reason to believe that James is warning rich people, and especially rich people of God, is because it connects to Leviticus 19, 12 through 18. Not just this passage, but really the whole book. So we're going to look at that passage, if we could flip there, Leviticus 19:12. And we're going to see what connections we can make between it and chapter and the book of James. So Leviticus 19:12 through 18, if somebody could read that.
Do not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly so you will not share in their guilt. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. You said through 19?
Yeah. No, sorry, through 18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So, in those verses, what connections do you see to James?
I mean, definitely like holding back wages.
And defrauding your neighbor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the verse I would point out as connecting specifically to the one we've just read, James 5:1-9.
Even though we're not focusing on the rest of James, there is a part in James that talks about partiality
Mm-hmm.
and favoritism.
Yeah.
Next to Leviticus 19:15.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like us to kind of look at the whole book of James just for this part, because just to see the argument that the whole book of James is based on this passage in Leviticus. So yeah, that's good. Partiality.
And spreading slander. There's a whole section about the tongue.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are a few more. Specifically, love your neighbor as yourself is quoted directly, almost really soon after faith without works is dead. And so the whole concept of this royal law, love your neighbor as yourself, is embedded in the book of James. And so the argument can be made, well, first of all, I thought it was cool. One of the scholars I read said that only one of the verses in that passage does not have a direct correlation to James. So that whole segment, you could find pieces. I probably couldn't tell you off the top of my head every single connection, but they're not too obscure either. But yeah, so you could make the argument that James is taking this passage in Leviticus where God is telling the Israelites how they should treat one another and say that he is applying it to the church and saying we should not be doing these things to each other either. And the one that Alex brought out of we should not be withholding wages from the workers that we hire. The idea of withholding wages, in Leviticus it's only don't withhold it overnight. The reason for that, the reason that God forbid that was because some workers lived so much paycheck to paycheck. They were so poor that if you withheld their money overnight, they just aren't having dinner that night. They need the food. They need the money for the food that they're about to eat.
Yeah.
But James takes it a step further and says that implies that they're never getting paid these wages, that they're being kept by the rich people in James 5 the whole time. So if we take the premise that part of James's audience are these rich Christians, we might be in trouble. Because we feel encouraged reading verses 7-9, wanting to be patient in our own troubles. But then we consider whether 1-6 fits us better than those verses in 7-9. American Christians make up only 5% of the global church. We're only 5% of the church, but we control half of the church's wealth.
Oh. That's something else.
So we're the 5% who control 50%. So we are clearly the wealthy Christians of our day.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. So, question for you: are we in the same camp as these rich Christians in James 5?
Yes.
Why or why not?
Because we control 50% of the wealth.
Okay.
My thought is like, what does that look like today, like in modern context, to hold wages from workers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think of like modern day slavery in developing countries.
Where people are not paid their wages or they are withheld and
Yeah.
they make products that we buy here in America.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think, I think it's like, I wonder if there's some connection between, like where our money goes and like how we choose to spend it,
Where we're like
inadvertently supporting that behavior. Yeah.
Inadvertently, or just or consciously. I think a lot of people know that slavery exists in this country, and we're like, okay, well, I'm gonna keep it under my Amazon.
Or like,
You know?
I think about Temu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Temu.
$1 for a
Shane.
AliExpress.
But-
This
but-
should be the
but we
Temu.
look
Shein,
at
yeah.
My
Yeah.
issue with that is we look at Temu and associate that with the Chinese slavery market, but that same exact thing happens right here, and with Amazon, and we don't want to acknowledge that because Temu is over there. No, Amazon created that, and Temu is an offshoot of Amazon, and we're doing it right here in this country. So I'll leave it in.
Sure.
So are we deserving of the punishments in James 5 then?
And how are the punishments modern
Yeah.
day? If we did a modern day, like
Modern day punishment.
what does that look like?
Yeah.
Modern day?
No, it's a question. Eternal damnation.
That's what I was gonna say. Is that I feel like some of it is timeless. Of
Yeah.
eternal damnation
Because
is
it's
in
talking about
view.
the misery that's coming on you, which isn't like a present reality. That's more of like a
Right.
eternal
Yeah.
consequence.
So we might not have moths eating our clothes, but the eternal damnation part still could be
They will eventually,
right.
because we can't take our wealth with us.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, I was kind of expecting to hear more of why we aren't rich oppressors. So this is interesting.
Very
That's what these guys.
Yeah.
We're like, oh yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we're screwed. Well, maybe my lesson will give some hope then. So, Christians make up 1/3 of the global population, or 1/3 of the people, but we receive. So this is all Christians, not just American Christians anymore. We're 1/3 of the global population, but we receive 53% of the world's annual income, and spend 98% of it on ourselves.
Wait,
Wait,
that,
say that
that is American or that's
No, this is all of Christianity.
Okay.
Christians make up 1/3. We're 1/3 of the world, but we receive more than half of the world's annual income, and we spend 98% of it on ourselves.
So even the
So
poor
basically,
Christians
Christians are
Right.
spending 98% of their income on themselves.
On themselves, and it's 50%
I
of
would
the
be curious
global.
what it is with like other religions.
Right.
Is it the
Yeah.
same kind of stat or
Yeah.
are they different? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, what are non-Christians doing? But also, are we saying that's a bad thing?
I would say that us
Like, what is the
spending 98% on ourselves is not super Christian of us,
Yeah.
not super
Yes.
biblical of us. I think that it's possible that we need to lower that percentage. Because I think it would make sense if non-Christians spend 100% of their money on themselves because they don't really have a motivation to give. But us just giving 2% seems kind of low in comparison to what the church or Jesus was doing. But
I
Welcome
guess
pushback.
I was trying to find like a concrete like command to tie that to of like how much money you should be spending, and I guess like theoretically you should be spending 90%, right? Because you should
Yeah.
be tithing 10%.
yeah,
So like, I don't know, like that. I think that when I look at that number alone, it doesn't compel me to be like, oh, that's wrong necessarily, because I think when you look at ways that money could be spent, it might actually be going to something good, but it might be categorized as things that are being sent.
you're right.
You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Yeah,
like,
there's probably some breakdown.
like
in
you could
stat.
be actually taking care of other people
Yeah.
and like taking care of the poor and like the orphans and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I argue with the stat more than
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's okay. That's good. Yeah. So, go ahead, sorry.
I didn't hear. It was a pretty like radical statement, but it was like if we really love that verse, like love another person as you love yourself. If you're really loving others as much as you love yourself, the challenge was, wouldn't you spend as much on them as you would on yourself? So it shifts it instead of like 90%. what did you do? Go 50 for yourself and 50 for
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And it was easier to hear when I was a high schooler and I didn't have that much.
Yeah, right.
$10.
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
I'll give you half my Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Yeah.
Now that we have kids and it's harder.
Yeah.
But it's like most of my money goes to my children.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like I'm spending it on myself.
Right.
I think of it as like the early church and this idea of like no one had any need because they were like selling their property and stuff to support one another. And it's definitely, it feels like that model of church feels more radical than what we live in.
Zeus.
Yeah, I think I would say. Yeah, we're getting attacked during the video. I think that I would say that we don't know who the rich Christians are in James specifically. We don't know how much money they're spending on themselves. We don't know exactly what their oppression looks like. But I do think that James is making a challenge for these rich Christians to look at their own lives and evaluate how they're spending their money and whether they should be doing it differently. So I think that would be my challenge for us too, is not to tell you a number, like you should be giving 50%, you should be giving 90%, you should be giving 10%. But for us to say, is God leading me to give more of myself? And so I have one last question for us to discuss, but I wanna also move this conversation to more than just finance, because some of us are stretched very thin on finance. So what are some ways that you could be giving more? Maybe it's not financial, but maybe it's time or talents. So what are some ways that you could give out of your excess? And it can be hypothetical or personal.
Yeah, I
I feel like to me, it
might look different for
everybody because
like I think it
could be,
it feels like it could become like a legalistic
thing, just like with the amount,
Yes.
like you should be giving this much money, like you
Mhm.
should be volunteering this much time,
Right.
or you should, you know what I mean? But I feel like everybody is gifted in such a different
Mhm.
way that like excess might look very different for everybody. Whereas like some people might have a lot of time that
Yeah.
they can donate, whereas some people are like really good at something that they could easily do
for other people that could
could be like a huge blessing, but like doesn't, ask a lot from them, or like I just think it could look very different
Mhm.
depending on
who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say for myself, like, the financial sphere is not the place where I have the most excess and the most ability to, find ways to give more. I think for me, it's time of what can I be doing with my time to give more to the church or to those in need. Trying to volunteer more. So I think that would be personally where I would say, while I would also say that I think that I would, there's some ways that financially I could give more. Yeah.
Time is money.
That's true. Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, so I've been painting a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Murphy,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna put you on the spot, but he could have a 5-minute conversation with someone about like business strategy, and that could be worth like tens of thousands of dollars in like consulting, just like value. And so like I've seen him with,
Nonprofits or
like people that are running businesses that can't afford that type of advice, and they'll literally just like have a conversation and he'll solve like a lot of problems, you know. So I think that's like one way that you're really gifted.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and I've seen you bless other people with that.
Oh,
But I think it, like, to me, I think it comes down to just like having like a generous mindset
Yeah.
of like being willing, like in whatever form it is, to not just like be so
It's so true.
Perspective and like
just being willing to kind of like be open and giving of yourself in different ways to other people.
I also think if you remember
That money is made up
Mm.
by people, and that God has given us the talents and the gifts as something bigger than dollars, and like it makes you remember that it's like I choose to, like, it feels great not to feel like you need to hold on to money, and it's so freeing. Like, 'cause there's times where we feel, well, not we feel, we broke, but I feel so rich in my head because it's like I don't quantify my wealth or my, what am I looking for? My, like, how I am going to show up by how many dollars I have. Is by all the other things God's blessed with. And I think that has just been the most freeing, like, wonderful kind of mindset that the Lord has given. Because when you do have a little bit of money, it's not that big a deal either. And you don't mind giving it away. You know? I just think that's really, like, cool.
Yeah.
I just want to continue to feel that as I hope we get more money. You know?
Yeah.
I just think it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think along with time, like even just, I think I've been exploring this idea of like relational bandwidth. So like Murphy, I'm gonna use Murphy as an example. I'm sure he's like running from one meeting to another all throughout the day, right? Whereas like my day is more open and flexible, so I can, you know, sit with a mom for an hour or two, and that's, you know, what I can provide or whatever, you know. Whereas he might not be able to do that because he's going, you know.
I can send you some meetings if you like.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Share the load.
But I think that's something too, like just spending time with one another and in community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think hospitality is another example.
Yeah.
Like some people are just like really good at like hosting and like creating like a really like welcoming environment, and I just always like, I feel like that's so like special, and I've always, you know, just been in awe of people who can just do that so easily. I know, yeah, for sure.
I think that was the question when I was downstairs with the kids.
Yeah, the question, we're kind of discussing what ways can you personally or people in general be more generous with their excess. And we opened up the question more than just financial wealth. So yeah, we've talked about like wealth of time, wealth of relational bandwidth.
I was trying to figure out the question from the answer.
Yeah.
Not happening. Or I mean, even just like opening up your home, I feel like that is, you're providing
Right.
something for someone, and that can be a big thing.
I think it's good, like, I think this is good, like, to talk about other ways we can be generous too. But I think that, like, I mean, yeah, we don't have a lot of money, and at the same time, I don't think that, like, excuses us from the expectation that we are also giving sacrificially, like, financially, even, you know? I mean, there's, like, the widow, you know, who gives everything, like, she's giving sacrificially. And so I don't think, like, well, we just don't have much, is like, I don't think that's an excuse. I think, like, if you truly see your money as, like, I genuinely believe this is not mine, you know, it doesn't belong to me. It's not mine to keep. And so if God brings someone by and I'm convicted to help them, this much. Maybe, like, I don't know, you should pray about it, but like maybe you are supposed to give everything, or maybe not, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that like it requires faith to give financially always, and especially if you don't have as much. And I think that we're still supposed to be doing that, even if not like only find other ways we can be generous, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I feel like it's really easy to like give what won't make a huge difference
Yeah.
Yeah.
in my own finances.
Yeah.
But I think what God calls us to a lot of the time is to give in
Abundance.
Yeah.
more than we are comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that's
Like maybe
really
you're supposed to
challenging.
feel it when you give,
Right,
like,
right.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
like it's
Right.
okay. Like maybe it's
Yeah.
supposed to hurt a little bit. Like that's what sacrificial means.
Yeah.
So true.
I read a book, I can't remember what book it was, but the guy was just talking about this concept, and he and his wife like helped a neighbor pay her rent, and they were like, okay, God, like provide us with the money to pay ours, and like rent's coming up, and they still hadn't like gotten this, you know, gift. And then he had I don't know if it was like a conversation with someone or the Lord just revealed it to him. He like looked around his apartment and he was like, oh, we have an excess of things. Maybe God's just calling me to get rid of some of my things to pay my rent. And so I think that was really challenging to me, because I was like, we kind of expect to live a certain like level of comfort.
Yeah.
Especially if we are generous, we're like, oh, well, God will just keep my comfort level the same. But sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah.
And He wants us to do more, which is hard.
I was expecting the story to end and like, and we got a check in the mail.
Right.
And it was 3 times as much as we paid.
Yeah.
And like sometimes that happens,
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Right. But I like how you compared it to like an act of like faith or trusting God that,
Yeah.
because I even think of that, like I tell people all the time, you know, being support based, like God has always met my needs. I can't always say that they're what I would like it to look like. But you know, I think that is, I think it's always like this battle of trust. Like, okay, if I give to this person on the street or whatever it is, for this opportunity, you know, is the Lord gonna,
Right.
is He gonna come through for me?
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's always the question. But
I think it takes a lot of discernment
oh yeah,
and wisdom to
yeah.
not just be like, I'm just gonna throw it all
Yeah, don't
away.
be foolish.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get this. So I'll never forget. There was a moment when Alex and I didn't really have any money coming in, and we had it was a hard, rough time, and pretty much the only cash I had was in my wallet, and our bank accounts were pretty.
Like, quiet, I would say.
There was not a lot of activity. And I remember I had $200 in my wallet, and that was like grocery money. I pulled into the Sprouts parking lot, and this woman came over to me, and she was like, "Hey, is there a chance you could spare like $5?" It's like I got my grandkids over. I live in that apartment, and all this other stuff. She's like, I just need to feed them, and I need to get rent out of all this other stuff. And I literally felt God say, "Empty your wallet." I was like, it's my money. And I literally heard her say, "Empty your wallet." And I emptied my wallet, and I said, "Here you go, ma'am." And she started like speaking in tongues. It was like, "Thank you, Jesus." And she went off in her merry way. And literally, like the next day, like God delivered like money into our bank account that was like what we were not expecting, and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, wow, like I just wonder if that was like a test, you know? You never know, but it was just so interesting. But I definitely felt like I could have gotten in my own way and been like, no, this woman's fake, you know? Like, but I literally felt like the Spirit was like, into your wallet, you know? And I feel like that happens a lot, like where we just gotta listen. It's hard to do that.
Yeah. especially when you don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phone's breaking.
Really, God?
Alex, what do you think of that?
This lady I was talking to in Target. Really, I mean, she was asking for money, but I didn't give her any, and it was hard because I was like, I feel like this is kind of a scam, but at the same time, it's like, what if it's not?
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, but
It's not really related.
I feel like wisdom, like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear from
Yeah.
the Lord, sometimes you don't hear from the Lord.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
Scary.
But it's like,
yeah.
but my thing is like, it's, you know, when people are asking for money,
like even if it is a scam,
is it necessarily like a bad thing to give? Because in the
No.
in the like the off chance that it's not a scam, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always think about like, you know, what if it's actually
day and age. Yeah.
What he was preaching about on Sunday.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So I used to have the mindset of I'm not gonna give anybody money because I don't trust them. And I believe everybody's scammers. I was a cop, right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody's a scammer. You're a liar, you know. And
You saw the worst of humanity.
I did see the worst
Yes.
of humanity, and I thought humans were awful and gross.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
we are.
Yeah. I still would believe that, but no, I'm just playing now. But actually, I'm not playing. But I think better of humans today, a little bit better. But where was I going with this? Oh, I was challenged by the Lord, and like literally, I prayed about it one day, and I was like, Lord, like help me through this. Like, why don't I want to give? And He was like, what if I'm asking you to give? And it is a scam, but that's how I bring them closer to me. And so, like, now I don't care if it's a scam or not. Matter of fact, if it's a scam, like the other day, this guy said, I want to buy. He had us on a sign, and he said, I want to buy weed, and that's what he did. And I took $5 out, or $4, because I give $2 bills now. I took.
Very specific.
It's the whole thing. But I took $4 out, and I said, hey, I was like, I'm going to ask you not to use this for weed and ask you to give this to someone. I was like, God bless you. I said, God wanted you to have this. And I gave it to him, and he goes, well, shoot. And that was it. And then I drove away. It was cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is, I just feel like.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was like, ooh, my sign worked.
Yeah. but I actually gave up caring. Like, I don't actually care.
Well, and I think also like it could be the other person, but it could also just be like God wanting to work in our hearts too, of just being more obedient. If it's Him telling us to, or if it's just working on that generous spirit and not being skeptical. I'm skeptical too, so I get it.
Yeah.
I have also seen the weed guy, and I'm signing every time. I'm like, this is amazing. Thanks for being honest.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
Did you also give him $4?
I, as a single woman, do not open my door or window to anyone when I'm on the road.
Yeah.
So I'm skeptical of everyone. That's a whole other thing. Yeah.
It's real.
But I remember being really challenged like a few years ago. Well, yeah, several years ago. Okay, this is when I first joined Crew. I was at a support meeting, and I remember this couple. They had 2 kids at the time. Now they have like 4, I think. And they said, we give a quarter of our income away. So let us look at what that is and see how we can, fit you into it. Which I just thought was amazing. I mean, at the time I was thinking, a quarter of your income? Like, I don't think I could afford that.
Yeah.
Like, I think I was really challenged by that and just amazed that there are people out there who are, I don't know, just looking at their finances in a different way than I ever would have imagined.
Yeah.
So I thought,
Yeah.
not that you have to give a quarter away. I just was like, what?
Right.
Say what now?
I had a pastor that I was working for who his goal, he also does real estate. He's bivocational. and his goal is to pay back the church everything that they've ever paid him, his entire salary over the whole time he's been there. And so every year when they would have given him a raise, like they did the previous pastors, he asks for a pay decrease. And he gives more and more to the church. And, you know, I don't think that pastors have to do that. I think that there's a right to get paid for the work that you do and take care of your family with that. But, I mean, it inspired me. It's like, you know, does God want me to do something like that? Does God want me to do that? If not, does God want me to do something like that? What virtuous goal should I have for my life in that way?
How did he take care of himself?
Like I said, he had a real estate business.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
He missed that whole part.
Yes, that's how.
Over time, he became homeless.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Scary.
Yeah, so that's how.
Okay.
His goal is to soon become not only a pastor who works for free, but is paying back anything they've ever paid for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he's got a business.
Yes, he does.
So I feel like that's different.
Yes.
Different than a full-time pastor.
He's a full-time pastor too. Full-time pastor and real estate.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I think it's a virtuous goal. I think that.
Because he could just live on he could just not work outside of being a
Right.
full-time pastor,
Yeah.
which is a full-time job.
Yeah.
But he's choosing to do something else and try to like bless the church.
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's very, very honorable for sure.
Wow.
Well, we have like, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe? Anything
Right.
else?
Yeah. I've been recording
Keep
for
going,
40
sorry.
minutes. No, I mean that was it. So yeah,
Oh.
my goal, we really just barely scratched the surface of James even at all. But my goal was kind of to show James in a new light, show that it's not just a bunch of legalistic commands for Christians, but that he is giving hope to Christians who are poor, telling them that seeking all of this wealth is not the way to go. And, you know, hopefully to challenge us to just think about what we could be doing. Yeah. Because I don't want to tell anybody in this room, you should be giving more. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is basically listen to God, hear what he's trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And these recordings.
And now do you need to cite your
There you go.
resources? The 20
Yes, I'm going to read off my resource list one by one.